Welcome to a more just and merciful world. I'm Kathy Humphrey, president of Carlow University. On this podcast, we talk to leaders, teachers, artists, historians, and scientists from around the globe to explore how to bring more justice and mercy in our own world. Today, I am so honored to sit with a piece of our history, a piece that is a legacy to our history, Mr. John McDarby. John, welcome.
Dr. Humphrey, it's such a pleasure to be here. I feel like an exhibit myself, a historical exhibit in a museum, but it's a great pleasure to be here in Carlow University, all the way from Carlow town, 181 years after our seven lovely Mercy sisters first came here. So it took me 181 years to get here in their footsteps.
It may have been 181 years, but you are here now, and we are thrilled that you have traveled across the seas to be with us this weekend, this wonderful weekend, where we are going to review and see the documentary that has been created around the history of the Sisters of Mercy. And you, as a historian, there could be no better person to shed light on this part of our history. So let's begin. We're going to begin from the beginning. So Veronica is your great-aunt.
Great-grandaunt.
Great-great-grandaunt.
Yes,
and Veronica was one of the 7 sisters who came from Carlow, Ireland to Pittsburgh. This is my favorite part of the story, to meet the next great need.
Well, it's an incredible story of a little girl born in the year 1816 to 2 people in a small town in Ireland, a little section of that town. It's a town with a bridge, just like Pittsburgh, and there's rivalry between one side of the river and the other side. And she was born on the Greig side of Carlow, and her father was James McDarby, and her mother was Catherine, and she grew up there and joined the Mercy Convent in Carlow town, on Dublin Road in Carlow, and that's a convent that was opened in the year 1837 by Catherine Macaulay herself, coming to Carlow and arriving with 6 nuns. Ireland at that time was a very poor place. It's not like the wonderful place, and the town is a wonderful town now, but one of the descriptions of Ireland at that time came from a national school teacher in Donegal, a place called Gweedore in Donegal, and he wrote to Dublin Castle, because Dublin Castle was the administrative headquarters of the English administration in Ireland. Ireland was ruled by England until just 100 years ago.
Right.
And in it, he is saying, he's talking a little bit about the poor facilities in his parish, and he goes on to give us this shocking picture. He said, none of either married or unmarried women can afford more than 1 shift. Now, 1 shift is a big overgarment. So people only had 1. And he said the fewest number cannot afford any, nor can many of them afford a second bed. The beds are straw, green and dried rushes. Their bedclothes are either coarse sheets or no sheets, and ragged, filthy blankets. If an unprejudiced gentleman should be sent here to investigate, I can show him about 140 children bare naked, and was so during winter, and some hundreds only covered with filthy rags, most disgustful to look at. He goes on to tell us then about weather problems and the crops being ruined, and how people face starvation, and concludes by saying of the people that their children crying and fainting with hunger, and their parents weeping, being full of grief, hunger, debility and dejection, with glooming aspect, looking at their children likely to expire in the jaws of starvation. And this was 1837. Within a few years, the 1840s, the mid-1840s, Ireland suffered the biggest famine in its history. In the Irish language, we call it An Gorta Mór. Sorry, it catches me even talking about it. This was the great hunger this was the potato famine and literally starvation in the country. It's still in folk memory, so which is why fellas of my age would have heard their parents say, don't waste food, don't leave nothing, eat up everything. There are people hungry. It's still very much in the folk memory in Ireland, and this was part of the motivation, I think, that Catherine Macaulay must have been thinking about. She would have known St. Matthew's exhortation to us, to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, and all of the lovely, what we now call the corporal works of mercy and the wonderful spiritual works of mercy. When she knew a little bit about the social conditions, and this was 6 years after she started the Mercy, Ireland was in big trouble. 2/5 of the people were just under the midpoint of the population, and there was a big population were in trouble.
And so your great aunt, great
aunt, yes,
made a decision to become a Sister of Mercy.
Yes.
At a time of just great chaos, great trouble, but she still made that decision. Why do you think she decided to become a Sister of Mercy?
It's very hard to know. It was a different time, and people, I think, were very spiritual. I think they had great regard for, certainly for God. And certainly for church and church leaders, and there were good examples around. There were great bishops, great priests, great prelates, great leaders in Ireland at the time. Literacy wouldn't have been high, so the literate people in the community would have been the priests, the teachers, and again you find the priests and you find the teachers in mercy and in education. Whatever her motivation is, and I believe it was the love of God that was her motivation to serve, and there would have been a good community of quite young people in that Mercy House in Carlow from 1837 onwards, and there would have been the age of Margaret O'Brien, 21. Margaret was the youngest of the 7. And that's really significant because you weren't an adult till you were 21. Okay. And so that she was at the point where she could make a decision.
So that was Margaret.
That was Margaret. Margaret was.
And how old was Veronica at that time when she made the decision to come to the States?
At that time, she was a little bit older. She was 27, but by the standards of the time, the average age of that little group was about 25. They went from the 21 to 32, I think 32, 33 for Frances Ward.
So these were very young women.
These were young women who were absolutely possessed of a zeal to further the kingdom of God. They would have seen that they were coming to a new diocese, that they were answering an appeal by Bishop O'Connor, who was a Cork man. And when any of your listeners come to Ireland, Cork is a special place. So he would have had the gift of being able to tell the story of the work he wanted them to do and what the fruits of that work would be.
Yes.
So, I mean, he would have painted a picture for them of really being able to help the homeless, to do something for the hungry, to do something for the poor, to do something for people who needed education. It would have been a rewarding offering. It was an attractive offering that you were going to make a difference.
Yes.
It would have been hard to resist.
Right. Now, I know that I believe there were 34 women.
Yes, and they all volunteered except Veronica.
And Veronica did not volunteer.
No, she didn't.
She sounds like a very smart woman.
So she was in a town with in a convent with before Vatican II, there wouldn't have been much opportunity to go out and go home.
Yes.
But on occasions, your family could come in and visit you.
Okay.
Not often, but there would have been an occasion. They could write letters into you, and you could write some letters back out. So she wasn't too far from her family. She could have had contact, and this was going to be totally different. When I came to Pittsburgh, I did it in a day. Okay, I had
Right.
a tiny layover
That's
in
right.
Boston. It was easy. It was easy peasy. For them, this was going to be a long journey. It was
Yes.
going to be over a month, all of it at sea, until they saw land again at New York. This was a tough choice, and you could be forgiven in the 1830s, 1840s for not choosing to go on a sailing ship. You know,
Absolutely.
It wouldn't be.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine
Yeah, it would,
being
like,
on a boat
like,
for a month.
For a month, like nowadays, people go on very luxurious boats for
Right.
cruises. The
Right.
well-off go on cruises all over
Right.
different parts of the world. But to make a choice, this was a one-way ticket. It was more than likely you were not coming back. So
Right.
you were certainly going to spread the kingdom of God.
Yeah. How do you think she got over the fact that she didn't want to come? And what tripped it for her from what you know? Because here's the reality. They couldn't have made her come, right?
Yes.
She did that out of obedience. But what do you think helped her to overcome her concerns about the trip?
I think she saw that some relatives of some of the seven were objecting and suggesting they didn't want their relatives to go so far, and that the community would suffer. The schools would suffer, the services that the sisters were providing would suffer if you'll take away 7 of your most active and your brightest. And the 7 themselves were saying, please don't interfere with the will of God. That they were the kind of messages going back to the family. Don't interfere with this mission. And those girls were persuasive on their parents and on their relatives, and they, I suppose, tried to do unencumbered and uninterfered the will of God, and I think that's what drove them. I think it's kind of hard for us in the 21st century with the internet and all the wonderful things we have for looking up information and for getting opinions and from all the influences that are on us, to put ourselves into the minds of trusting people that trusted their superiors, that trusted very interesting and very persuasive and very good people like Bishop Michael O'Connor and their own clergy in Carlow at the time, in Carlow town. So
they answered. These women answered the call first.
Yes.
To become Sisters of Mercy. Now here's another call.
This was a
Right?
big call.
It's a big call. It's a call that's going to cut them off from their families. It's a call that is going to require a lot of physical energy to be in a boat for a month to get to their destination. They've never been in the States before, if I'm
Absolutely
correct.
not. No, and travel again would have been so difficult. As we get further into that period in history, people were trying to escape hunger and poverty in Ireland, and some of those ships didn't make it very far out into the Atlantic. So much so that some of those sailing ships were called coffin ships because they went down with all souls on board. So this was a terribly interesting period, and it was just before the Great Famine. We were within 2-3 years of that very serious famine. I'm sorry, I've
But she
I've
still,
got back to your
but they
question.
still came, right? And so she answers this call, and she comes.
Yes.
One of the things that I have heard Sister Sheila say many times is that they came to America and they began to work immediately.
Yes, that's a lovely sentence.
I'm sure I have paraphrased it incorrectly,
I'd
but it's about right, okay?
It is about right, yes. And like I've heard that lovely quote, and like you, I'll paraphrase that the story in the annals is that they began ministering to the hungry and the poor immediately.
Yes.
Isn't that fabulous? That they were driven. I apply it to myself, and I would say I get to work, and I don't get to work immediately. I have to chat to all the colleagues and see how their weekend went and what the stories are they have.
Right.
So listen, these were fabulous people, driven by a vision, driven by a zeal.
Right.
I wish I had some of it. It
well,
was
and
good.
the zeal really was about serving others. It was the ultimate sacrifice.
It certainly was,
in so many ways. They have these gifts. They've been asked to do a task. Veronica really didn't want to do the task. And I think often about how often we are required to do things we don't want to do. But we stand today on Veronica's legacy.
Yes.
We are here at Carlow University because those 7 women were brave enough to answer 2 calls. A call to go into the ministry and a call to come and minister specifically to Pittsburgh.
And I never tire of admiring the vow of poverty, the vow of chastity, that vow of obedience, and that whole idea, which later became a vow of service, that you are going to give, you are going to do, you are going to be useful, you are going to make a difference.
Yes. Now, did you find out, because I can't imagine if my daughter was to leave me, I don't have a daughter, but if I had one, because I don't want people who are listening saying, when did she get a daughter? But I don't have one, okay?
Yes.
But if my daughter was to leave the States and go somewhere that I didn't know that I was ever going to see her again, it would be a real heartbreaking and very concerning. And would she be safe? Was there any communication back and forth once they arrived? And if so, what was the communication like?
No letters have survived in the family for definite, right? So there are no letters from Veronica that made their way down those 181 years. But I would be aware that letters came from Frances Ward back to the mother house in Carlow, and certainly there would have been correspondence there.
Tell us a little bit about that. What were those correspondences like?
There were absolutely beautiful letters, and I think, and Sister Sheila would be the real expert on this. I think there were letters to Catherine Macaulay, and there were wonderful, by today's standards, saintly letters to wonderful fellow sisters in the Mercy Order. We don't write letters like this now. We don't communicate in that beautiful. And now we send, one-sentence emails, and
text messages, 3 words, right?
And sometimes you're down to letters.
That's right.
That mean whole words.
That's right.
But there were reports back and beautiful sentiments, always centered on God and working for God.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of correspondence that was going back and forward between Carlow, Ireland, and Carlow Convent here.
So today is what we call Mercy Day of Service. And many of our students, our new students specifically, go out and serve the community. And Veronica and the other sisters, the ultimate servants. Talk to us a little bit about Veronica as the door opener for the Carlow community.
Sure.
The Pittsburgh community, actually.
Well, the funny thing is, I know she did it in St. Leo's in Carlow before she left, and hence or otherwise, as they say, she did it here.
Yes.
And so when you rang the bell, the face that came to greet you was Veronica, and by all accounts, she helped where she could. She gave assistance to people who are seeking assistance. And there might be times when it wasn't there or it wouldn't have been possible to give. And by the stories that have reached back to the Carlow family, tried to be helpful, even if she couldn't give anything. That it was at the last resort, the kind word, the good wish. There was something offered, whether it was that or a physical assistance. I should mention that Elizabeth Strange did write back to Carlow and kept a diary as well of the voyage, and they are still existing in Mercy Archives.
That's wonderful.
But Veronica, yes, Veronica would have seen herself, and this is one of those funny traits that comes right down through the family, that left to our own devices, even in 2024, we would be people who would sit in the back row rather than the front row. So if she saw that I had crossed the Atlantic to talk to you about her, she would have some choice words with it, and the words would be, "Stop talking, do not be at this, just get away and stop talking about me." Right. That she would say she was the least of women, and I would be equally modest and say, listen, I am probably the least qualified of all the wonderful people I've already met here in Carlow University and in the Mercy community here. One of the least qualified to talk about Veronica or the wonderful seven that came in 1843. There are wonderfully qualified spiritual people, academically qualified people. Sure. That I pale into significance.
Oh no, we are so thrilled that you're here, because you bring such texture to Veronica's life for us. What was the significance of having one person open the door all the time? Do you know?
Yeah, I suppose it was constancy and the reliability that whenever you went, that was the face you were going to see. She was as we often train people now who are going to be front of house in any business or in any hospital. I know a lot of your graduates end up in the health field. That people want the constant face. Right. They don't want to be seeing a different person on a Monday to the person they meet on the Tuesday. Right. The one point of contact is it's important. You have a steady contact that is a rock solid contact for you, and I think that was the idea that she would be the portress, the lady who would open the door and dispense the help if it was in her power to do that, assist people who might be employed to assist her. There were over the years some lay people, young girls, and that brought in to some of the duties would be to open the door, and she would be guiding and helping, and the stories are she looked after them like a mother. Right. And that she was known for her wit, which is good, and her charm, right. and that's good as well, because look, when all is lost, you know, and you are as far down as you can get. Right. If somebody kindly gives you a little smile or a little bit of cheerfulness, in the worst situation, well, it's a start of a lift off the floor. Absolutely. And if that is somebody that's constant, that you're going to see on the Monday, as well as the Tuesday, as well as the Friday, it's super that is the face of Mercy. It's the face of the community. It's valuable. It's a worthwhile thing to have that face all the time. Absolutely.
You know, there is such symbolism in this story for us. As it being a part of Carlow University's legacy. Every day we are trying to open doors. Sure. And the consistency that you speak of, Our faculty and staff try to be that for our students every single day, and it is really a Carlow difference, that the students know that we are here for them. And it sounds like that is rooted into our very existence from those 7 sisters who came to do that work, that they were there for the community. They cared for them. This morning, I said to the students, to whom much is given, much is required, helping them to understand that we are not here for ourselves. And clearly, there was tremendous selfless acts with her, from her movement from Carlow to her movement across the seas to that front door, opening the door, ministering and assisting people in the middle of their own chaos. The impact of Veronica was so important that the McDarby Institute was created here in her name.
Yes.
And oftentimes you get to meet the folks from Carlow, because those folks travel over to Carlow, Ireland.
Carlow, yes, they sure do.
To really get a chance to look at the history and touch and feel that history. Tell me a little bit about what that institute means for you.
It's a great honor, and just, you know, the way I found out about it was accidental. I met 2 lovely visitors in our lovely museum in Carlow Town in Ireland one day at lunchtime, and I said hello to them. But very much like Veronica, I would be the person who would welcome them and say, "You're welcome to the museum. How are you? Where are you from?"
Right.
And these 2 ladies told me they were from Pittsburgh.
Uh-huh.
And I had known the story about the 7 sisters and Carlow University, and I asked them if they knew Carlow University, and one lady's eyes lit up and she said, "I worked there." And I said, you don't, do you? And we got into a lovely chat with a lovely lady called Kathy Chrisman. And Kathy worked in HR here. Okay. And my next stop was to bring them to see our Carlow College, which is a former seminary, right. Now doing wonderful degrees in the humanities, in child studies, in a beautiful degree in citizenship and community studies, and they do masters work in kind of therapeutic childcare. I brought her over to just see, could we meet somebody on the staff over there? Could we walk through the corridors? And they tolerate me very well in Carlow College and let me do that occasionally. And we met some lovely people, including the president's sister, who was on the HR side there. And that was Gertrude O'Neill. And Gertrude was the sister of the then president, who was a wonderful man called Father Kevin O'Neill. In the Irish language, we always called him on Tahar Cuivine O'Neill is what we would have referred to him as, and they hit it off immediately, Kathy and Gertrude O'Neill, because they were both HR heads. So these were people who manage people and help people, and they really hit it off well. And we moved then from that college to the Mercy Convent, because I wanted them to see where the 7 sisters came from, and we went up those famous steps, and in that famous door to meet the lady who opened the door on that day. And it happened to be the most wonderful sister, Sister Philomena Griffin, and she entertained them wonderfully. And I went off to lunch at that stage, leaving in the very capable hands of Sister Philomena. But Kathy and her lovely friend, again, immediately, I had given them a business card, and they told Sister Sheila they had met a guy called McDarby. You've got to make contact. And Sister Sheila did, and we're in contact since then. I see. And without fail, I meet Sister Sheila at least once every year when she brings a group from the Carlow Institute, from the McDarby Institute over. And I learned a little bit about the wonderful spiritual program that they have. And I was given a badge, so I think I'm an honorary member without having done the program, and I didn't wear the badge coming because I would feel an imposter not having done the program to wear the badge in the college where people work so hard at this program. But I love absolutely love meeting the people from the McDarby Institute coming back to Carlow. And I kind of always said to Sister Sheila, this is the completion of a circle. This is the closing of a circle. And I always said, look, I'd love to organise a group from Carlow Town to come to see Carlow University. And we talked about it before COVID. In recent days, I found some emails that we exchanged, myself and Sister Sheila, in 2020, in the January of the year before the dreaded COVID arrived on our planet. And we were talking about places to visit and things to see and all of that. And when the suggestion kind of sat quietly for a long time, and until we did a lovely meeting, an online meeting with John Cardone, and he suggested that we might try and surprise Sister Sheila. So I was up for this, for Sister Sheila.
You were up for it.
And
that's
for
good.
Mercy. I was on for this project. Now, since then, Sister Sheila found out about the surprise, so my arrival wasn't as big a surprise, but it was still very exciting. It's very exciting for me to come across the Atlantic, and in my very, very tiny, almost ineffective way, to just tiptoe in the wonderful footsteps of the seven, but particularly Veronica. I kind of liken myself to her in some ways, welcoming people in my very small and humble job, and hopefully that's a help and makes people enjoy their visit, because people visiting somewhere, they like to be greeted. And they like to be asked a tiny question or two of where you're from, and are you interested in anything particular? Can we show you any particular artifact or whatever? But the great thrill yesterday of going out to St. Saviour's Cemetery and seeing Sister Veronica's grave, and it was something special. We said a decade of the Rosary at her grave, and afterwards one Hail Mary in the language that she would have heard a fair bit of in the 1840s. The Irish language would have been very vibrant in the Ireland she left. There was a huge effort over many years to stamp out the Irish language, and it was almost totally successful. And we're back at a wonderful point where about 40% of the population can now speak Irish. So we said a prayer in Irish at her grave, and we went on to visit the graves of the two strange sisters. We went on to visit Philomena Reed's grave and Josephine Cullen's grave, and it just meant something to come that far to pray at those particular graves on that particular day. And I know it was Mercy Week, and I know that it was today's Mercy Service Day, and we've just missed Mercy Day, but it was good, it was right, it was a good time. The entire experience felt good and felt right. When something feels good and is right,
it is.
The energy is right about
That's
this.
so true. And the wonderful thing about everything that you've experienced, I have some idea of what that was like, because when I stood in the driveway of the house in Carlow, Ireland, where those 7 women left from Ireland,
isn't it special,
to come to this space and place. It is very special, and we're very fortunate here because we live on this legacy of mercy, of a group of women who came here to create a more just and merciful world. And we're so fortunate to hear a little bit more about Veronica, a little bit more about the passageway. And it's a reminder to us that the work that we are doing today continues to be important. We are still trying to meet the next great need, and we are still trying to ensure that our students leave Carlow University and go out and open up doors to create a more just and merciful world. Thank you so much for being with me today.
A great pleasure, and I hope that all of us do exactly as you've exhorted us to do, to work in our tiny little ways to make it more just and more merciful. None of us on our own can house the homeless, or feed the hungry, or give drink to the thirsty, but together we can find organizations, we can join, we can contribute. We must do that.
Yes.
That's the message for 2024 and beyond.
Absolutely.
Thank you for telling us all about your views on it, as you do so often.
Yes.
And may we remember the 7 and go forward. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to chat about it. It was lovely.
Absolutely. It was lovely for me too. Thank you, John.